a former Navy SEAL, returned home, planning to sell his parents' old store and leave town forever. But in the middle of a freezing storm, he found a mother German shepherd protecting 3 puppies inside an abandoned delivery cart. The dog led him to an elderly couple trapped in a cold, powerless house, sharing their last food with an aging cat. When Harlan tried to save them, he discovered a company was using false fees and fake reports to take their home. The deeper he fought, the more Sable taught him that true rescue is not controlling someone's life, but standing beside them when they are afraid to ask for help. Together, a wounded veteran, a faithful dog, and a divided town turned an old general store into a place of hope, dignity, and second chances. Where are you watching from, and what touched you most? Please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and share more healing stories. The winter sky over North Dakota was bright enough to deceive a man. Sunlight lay across the frozen fields in a pale silver sheet, and from a distance the land appeared calm, almost holy. But the wind had teeth. It tore loose snow from the ditches, lifted dry grass and powdered earth from the exposed fields, then drove everything across County Road 9 in long white and brown ribbons. Harlan Vey kept both hands loose on the steering wheel of his father's old pickup. At 46, Harlan had the solid, disciplined build of a man who had spent most of his adult life training his body to obey before fear could speak. He stood a little over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, lean muscle, weathered light skin, and a long face made harder by high cheekbones, and a nose that had healed slightly crooked after an old fracture. His dark brown hair was cut short, though silver had begun to show at both temples. His gray-blue eyes moved constantly between the road, the mirrors, and the tree lines. Years as a Navy SEAL had taught him that danger rarely announced itself honestly. Sometimes it came with gunfire. Sometimes it looked like an empty road beneath a beautiful sky. He wore an old olive combat shirt under a dark moss-green field jacket, brown tactical work pants, worn leather boots, and a black military watch. None of it had been chosen for memory. Harlan did not believe in dressing for memory. Yet nearly everything inside the truck belonged to the past. 2 suitcases rested behind the seat. A folder containing his parents' estate documents lay on the passenger side. Beneath it was a white and red sign he had purchased before crossing the state line. For sale. The sign had felt practical when he bought it. Now it seemed to be watching him. Harlan told himself he would remain in Mercy Ridge for 90 days. He would inventory the store, repair only what was necessary, sell the building, settle the remaining bills, and leave before winter loosened its grip on the prairie. 90 days was not a return. It was an assignment. The road curved near the old cemetery. Harlan saw the iron gate through the blowing snow, then the line of bare cottonwoods beyond it. He did not turn his head. His father had been buried there 14 months earlier. His mother had joined him 8 months after that. Harlan had reached neither funeral in time. His grip tightened against the steering wheel. He relaxed it again. Tension did not improve control. His father had taught him that while letting a 12-year-old Harlan drive the store truck across a hayfield, the memory arrived without invitation. So did his father's last question. "Are you helping me live, son, or arranging things so you can worry less?" Harlan pressed his jaw shut and watched the road. Something dark moved through the blowing snow ahead. He slowed. At first he thought it was a piece of tarp caught against the ditch. Then the shape lifted its head. A German shepherd stood in the road. Harlan braked 20 yards away. The dog was female, perhaps 5 years old, with a black saddle across her back and warm tan fur along her chest, face, and legs. She was lean enough for her ribs to show faintly beneath her winter coat, but her body still carried the deep chest and strong legs of a working breed. Her right ear stood straight, the tip of her left ear folded slightly forward. Dark amber eyes watched the truck without panic. She was standing in front of an old delivery cart. Harlan recognized it before he recognized the faded lettering, Mercy General Store. The blue paint had peeled from the wooden sides, and rust marked the metal frame. It was not a supermarket cart. It was one of the heavy-wheeled carts his parents had once used to deliver groceries to customers who lived near town. The broad rubber wheels had been designed for gravel and shallow snow. One wheel was trapped in a frozen rut. The wind pushed against the cart, shifting it inch by inch toward the ditch. The shepherd placed one front paw against the wheel. Harlan stared. The dog was not merely standing near the cart. She was holding it in place. He turned off the engine and stepped out. Cold struck the exposed skin around his eyes. Dust and snow hissed against his jacket. The shepherd lowered her head but did not growl. "Easy," Harlan said. Her gaze moved from his face to his hands, then to his boots. She was measuring him. Harlan knew the expression. Men had worn it in doorways before deciding whether to trust the stranger carrying a weapon. He stopped several feet away. Inside the cart, 3 German shepherd puppies were curled beneath a striped blue and brown wool scarf. They looked about 6 weeks old. One male had heavy black coloring around his head and back, with a small tan patch on one front paw shaped almost like a mitten. Another puppy, also male, had ears that had not yet decided whether to stand, and one paw tangled in a loose piece of string. The smallest was female, with a pale golden face, a black muzzle, and a body tucked so deeply under the scarf that only her nose showed. Beside them lay 6 cans of soup, 2 cans of beans, an open package of crackers, 2 cans of soft cat food, and a small packet of hearing aid batteries. Harlan looked back at the dog. Snow had gathered along her spine and shoulders. The fur on her belly remained warmer and darker where she had recently been lying over the puppies. She had left their warmth only to keep the cart from rolling. "You've been here a while," he said. The shepherd blinked once. Harlan moved to the side of the road and examined the snow. Most tracks had been erased, but years of reading disturbed ground had taught him what ordinary vision missed. A set of old boot prints led away from the cart. The right foot had dragged more heavily than the left. The trail crossed toward a line of windbreak trees, then vanished near a wide impression made by vehicle tires. Someone had left the cart. Perhaps that person had fallen. Perhaps another driver had picked him up. Perhaps the dog knew more than the road was willing to show. Harlan crouched near the cart. Beneath one wheel, he found a damp paper grocery bag. The old Mercy General Store logo was printed across the front. His mother's handwriting appeared beneath it. "Deliver to E. Morrow. Do not charge." Water had blurred the rest. Harlan ran one gloved thumb over the ink. His mother had always written customer names in careful blue letters. She had believed handwriting mattered, because people could feel the difference between being recorded and being remembered. The shepherd suddenly turned. She ran toward the ditch and began clawing at the snow. Harlan followed, expecting another puppy. The dog dug with urgent, controlled strokes until something pale appeared beneath the surface. Harlan reached down and lifted a broken hearing aid. A crack split the casing. The battery compartment hung open. 2 letters had been engraved on the back. EM. The wind moved over the road, but for a moment Harlan heard nothing. He looked toward the fading boot tracks. The shepherd stood beside him, breathing hard, her amber eyes fixed on the device in his hand. She had not found a random object. She had brought him to evidence that someone had walked away without something necessary. Harlan took out his phone and called the sheriff's office. Sheriff Iris Bell answered on the third ring. Iris was 48, compact and strong, with dark hair that reached her shoulders when she was not working, and was usually tied low beneath her winter cap. Her expression had always been calm enough to make nervous people confess more than they intended. She had known Harlan in high school and had never once treated his military service as permission for him to ignore local law. "Harlan Vey," she said. "Either you arrived quietly, or Della Crane has finally lost her ability to report incoming vehicles. I'm on County 9. That sounds less quiet." He described the dog, the cart, the supplies, the boot trail, and the hearing aid. Iris became silent. "Initials are EM," Harlan said. "The bag says Morrow. Everett Morrow," Iris replied. 79. Lives with his wife Ruth off Lantern Road. "Has anyone reported them missing?" "No." "When were they last seen?" Another pause. "Della delivered mail Monday. She didn't see either of them, but the box had been emptied." "Polly Greer hasn't reported a missed meal delivery because Ruth canceled the service several weeks ago." Harlan looked toward the dog. "What about the store? Your mother used to know when Everett came in for batteries." "How often?" "Beginning of every month." The date on Harlan's watch was already 5 days beyond that. "Why hasn't anyone checked?" Iris inhaled. "Because in Mercy, people usually realize someone has stopped appearing after they've already convinced themselves there's a harmless reason. And sometimes, by the time they stop making excuses for the silence, a burst of static swallowed the rest of her words. Harlan moved away from the truck. "I'm heading to Lantern Road. You're not." "Iris." A cottonwood came down across the lower section. "County plow is working from the north, but the drifts near the Morrow place are too deep. You won't get that truck through tonight." "I can walk." "In this wind, without knowing whether the old drainage cut is covered." "No." Harlan looked toward the shepherd. She stood over the hearing aid, as if guarding the meaning of it. "I've walked through worse. That sentence is exactly why I don't trust you to decide." The old irritation between them stirred. Iris continued before he could answer. "Take the dog and the puppies somewhere warm. I'll send a deputy toward the north approach, but no one reaches that house until the plow opens a route." Harlan almost argued. Then the smallest puppy began to tremble beneath the scarf. The shepherd immediately turned back to the cart. Harlan knew what a choice looked like when every option felt like betrayal. He could chase a trail already disappearing into the storm, or he could protect the living creatures directly in front of him. "Morning," he said. "First light if the road opens." The line ended. Harlan placed the hearing aid in a clean evidence bag from his truck kit. Then he approached the cart. The shepherd shifted between him and the puppies. "I'm not leaving them here," he said, "and neither are you." He lifted the black-faced male first. The puppy was cold but alert. It immediately caught the edge of Harlan's glove in its tiny teeth and refused to release it. "Good," Harlan murmured. "At least one of us is confident." He placed the puppy inside the heated cab. The second male twisted in his hands, trying to follow the loose string from the cart, as though rescue were an inconvenience interrupting important work. The small female made no protest. She pressed her face against Harlan's coat and remained there until he set her beside her brothers. The mother dog watched every movement. Only after all 3 puppies were inside did she step toward the truck. She stopped at the open door, her nose lifted. Then she looked back toward the vanished trail. Harlan understood. "You don't want to leave." The shepherd's left ear tipped forward. "Neither do I." He waited. After several seconds, she climbed into the cab and curled around the puppies. Harlan secured the old delivery cart in the truck bed, then continued toward Mercy Ridge. By the time he reached the main street, the storm had thinned enough for the town to appear in pieces. A grain elevator rose behind the rooftops. A church steeple stood against the pale sky. Snow gathered beneath the windows of closed businesses. Mercy General Store waited at the corner. The one-story building had a faded green metal roof, a weathered wooden sign, and broad front windows clouded by cold. The brass bell above the entrance still hung slightly crooked. Harlan unlocked the door. The smell met him first. Old oak, coffee beans, laundry soap, dust warmed by a cast-iron stove. He stood motionless. For one impossible second, he nearly heard his father cough behind the counter. He nearly heard his mother ask whether he had wiped his boots. Then the door swung shut, and the brass bell gave a lonely note. The room was empty. Harlan switched on the lights. Only half of them responded. He carried the puppies inside in a cardboard produce box lined with blankets. The shepherd followed. She moved slowly through the store, sniffing the shelves and floorboards. When she reached the old oak counter, she paused at a worn oval rug beside the register. A framed photograph hung on the wall above it. Harlan's parents stood behind the counter 15 years younger. At their feet lay an old black and tan shepherd named Mercy, the store dog Harlan remembered from childhood. The mother dog looked at the photograph. Then she lowered herself onto the exact spot where Mercy had once slept. Harlan felt something tighten inside his chest. Don't make meaning out of coincidence, he told himself. The black-faced puppy escaped the box. It ran beneath the counter, dragging Harlan's old leather glove in its mouth. The glove had belonged to his father. Harlan had found it in the truck and kept it without admitting why. Bring that back. The puppy vanished deeper beneath the counter. Harlan knelt, reached under, and caught the pup around its round belly. As he pulled it out, his hand struck a metal ring set into the floor. A square section of oak lifted on hidden hinges. Beneath it lay a thick ledger and several envelopes tied with string. Harlan removed the ledger. His mother's handwriting filled the pages. Names, dates, purchases, amounts. But the notes beside the unpaid balances did not read like debts. Repaired Walter's delivery truck. Stayed with Marion after surgery. Brought soup during the March storm. Drove Ruth to Bismarck for her lung appointment. Harlan turned more pages. Everett and Ruth Morrow appeared again and again. The final note beside their names was written in darker ink. Do not send a bill. They have paid in ways money cannot measure. Harlan sat on the floor. The puppy climbed into his lap with the glove still in its mouth. For most of his life, Harlan had thought his parents ran a store badly because they trusted people too much. Now he wondered whether he had misunderstood what they believed they were selling. The old landline behind the counter still had a dial tone. Harlan found the Morrow number in the ledger and called. The phone rang. Once, twice. The shepherd raised her head. 5 times. The puppies settled together near the stove. 8 times. Harlan watched the dark front windows. 11 rings. No answer. He lowered the receiver. The shepherd stood. She walked to the striped scarf from the delivery cart, pressed her nose against it, and breathed deeply. Then she took one corner between her teeth and carried it to the front door. Harlan looked at the blowing snow outside. Lantern Road is closed. The dog did not scratch. She did not whine. She stood facing east, toward a house hidden beyond miles of white fields and fallen trees. Harlan turned off the front lights 1 row at a time. The puppies curled together near the stove. The shepherd remained at the door. Minutes passed. She did not lie down. Watching her, Harlan understood something he had resisted since finding the cart. The dog had not been waiting beside the road for anyone who might stop. She had been waiting for someone who would notice what was missing. and somewhere beyond the storm, a familiar person had failed to return. Barrett told himself the arrangement would last 7 days. 7 days was measurable. 7 days could be written on a calendar, crossed off one square at a time, and survived without sentiment. 7 days did not mean adoption, attachment, or a change of plans. It meant temporary responsibility, nothing more. The puppy disagreed almost immediately. Barrett named him Rivet on the second morning, after finding him asleep inside a shallow carton of metal fasteners. Rivet had somehow emptied half the box onto the floor, curled his black and tan body into the remaining space, and fallen asleep with one oversized paw resting over the label. The name fit too well. It sounded small, stubborn, metallic, and difficult to remove once properly set. Rivet accepted it by chewing the corner of the box. Barrett opened Wren & Son Hardware only because Amos had left several completed orders waiting beneath the counter. He called the customers listed on the paper bags and told them they could collect their purchases before the store closed permanently. He emphasized the final word, permanently. By 9 in the morning, Rivet had hidden 6 screws beneath the front mat, dragged a measuring tape across the plumbing aisle, and climbed into a leather glove bin, where he lay on his back with all 4 paws in the air. Barrett found him there while searching for the missing tape. "You are not helping." Rivet opened one dark eye. Barrett lifted him out and set him on the floor. Rivet immediately seized the loose end of the measuring tape and ran. The bright yellow strip extended behind him like a ridiculous tail. It caught Barrett across the ankle as he stepped around a display of paint cans. His balance shifted. One shoulder struck the shelf, and the uppermost stack of gallon cans wobbled dangerously. Barrett caught the display with both hands before it fell. Behind him, Rivet sat down. One ear stood upright, the other folded sideways. His expression suggested that gravity, poor shelving, and human clumsiness were unfortunate matters outside his control. A laugh came from the doorway. Laurel Dane stood there with a tray of coffee balanced against one hip. She wore a pale blue shirt beneath a cream-colored bakery apron, and flour dusted one sleeve near the elbow. Her chestnut hair had been twisted up carelessly, leaving loose strands against her freckled cheeks. There was no cruelty in her laugh, only surprise and a warmth Barrett had not heard inside the store since before the funeral. He straightened the paint cans. "I had it. Clearly." He dragged the tape. Laurel looked down at Rivet. "Did he?" Rivet placed one paw on the tape and looked innocent. Laurel's smile widened. Barrett had forgotten that the store could hold laughter. The sound moved strangely through the old aisles, touching the pegboards, the dusty windows, and the wooden counter where Amos had once complained that people came in for nails and stayed to discuss weather until retirement. For one uncomfortable second, Barrett felt the room respond, not like a haunted place, not like anything supernatural, more like a house settling after someone finally opened a door. He turned away first. Laurel left the coffee near the register. "Walt says the puppy stole his hat yesterday. Walt left it on the floor. He says that is not how he remembers it. Walt remembers 3 versions of everything." That was true. Walter Drummond arrived before noon to defend himself. Walt was 69, short and square through the middle, with a weather-reddened face, a trimmed white mustache, and a fringe of silver hair beneath a brown wool cap. He had worked for the Briar Harbor Post Office for 37 years, which had given him an excellent memory for names, addresses, and other people's business. Retirement had not reduced his interest in information. It had only removed the uniform that once made his curiosity look official. "I was told there was a criminal animal operating here," Walt announced. Rivet trotted toward him. Walt pointed a stern finger. "Do not charm me." Rivet sat on Walt's boot and looked up. Walt lasted 4 seconds. "Well," he said, bending to scratch behind the puppy's good ear, "a man should hear both sides before passing judgment." He bought a small box of picture hooks he did not need. Later that morning, Evie Mercer entered slowly, leaning on a wooden cane polished smooth by use. Evie was 72, with a narrow frame, pale skin, and soft white hair cut just below her ears. She wore a green cardigan buttoned carefully over a flowered blouse, and her eyes were a clear blue that carried both humor and the fatigue of someone who had spent too many years proving she could still manage alone. She asked for 2 screws for a loose handrail. Barrett found the correct size and placed the packet on the counter. Evie studied Rivet, who had fallen asleep beneath a display of work gloves. "Amos would have liked that," she said. Barrett looked up. "The dog? The noise." "What noise?" "Things moving around." Evie paid in coins, counting them twice. Barrett noticed her hand trembling slightly and asked whether the rail was safe. "It is still attached. That was not the question." She gave him a look. "You sound like your father when you do that." Barrett regretted asking. Evie tucked the screws into her purse. Before leaving, she touched the edge of the counter with 2 fingers, almost as if greeting someone who was no longer there. By the 3rd day, news of Rivet had traveled through the bakery, the post office, the Harbor Cafe, and half the houses on Alder Street. The customers did not arrive in crowds. Briar Harbor was too old and too cautious for sudden enthusiasm. They came 1 or 2 at a time, pretending to need things. 2 fishermen entered to debate whether Rivet's folded ear would eventually stand. One claimed 6 weeks. The other said never. Neither bought anything until Barrett asked whether they planned to conduct the argument all afternoon. They left with a coil of rope and a pack of waterproof matches. A boy of about 9 arrived with his grandmother and brought Rivet a faded tennis ball. The boy was thin, solemn, and missing 1 front tooth. Barrett watched him roll the ball across the floor. Rivet chased it into the paint aisle, returned proudly, then dropped it at Barrett's boot instead of the boy's. The child laughed. For a moment, Barrett saw the photograph from behind the old price board. A 9-year-old boy behind the counter, a missing tooth, a man standing behind him who did not know how little time he had. Barrett stepped away from the ball. Rivet followed. The puppy had begun to recognize Barrett's routines. He waited beside the storeroom when Barrett made coffee. He slept beneath the counter while invoices were sorted. Whenever Barrett reached for the front door key before 5, Rivet seized one of his bootlaces and leaned backward with all the determination his small body could produce. Barrett told himself the behavior meant nothing. Dogs learned patterns quickly. Lonely men assigned meaning even faster. Nolan Prentice arrived on Thursday afternoon with a leather portfolio beneath one arm. In daylight, Nolan looked even more controlled than he had at the funeral. He was tall but not broad, with ash-brown hair combed precisely away from his forehead, a clean-shaven face, and a charcoal overcoat too refined for the sawdust near the entrance. His pale gray eyes moved over the store with professional calm, measuring walls, ceiling height, window width, and every other feature that could be converted into cost. "I see operations have resumed," he said. "They haven't." Nolan glanced toward Walt, who was comparing different sizes of wall anchors while pretending not to listen. "The door is open. I'm finishing my father's orders." Of course. Rivet approached Nolan, sniffed one polished shoe, then returned to Barrett without wagging his tail. Nolan watched him go. "So this is the famous interruption. Temporary. Everything is, eventually." Nolan walked outside and looked up at the faded sign. The survey team could begin with the front elevation next week. It would help if the sign came down first. Barrett followed him to the sidewalk. The contract isn't signed, no, but removing it would save time. Rivet stepped between them and gave one short bark. Nolan looked down. It seems the board of directors objects. He has no vote. Nolan lifted his gaze to the words Wren and Son. You may not either. The remark was delivered lightly, but it landed with precision. Barrett's shoulders stiffened. Nolan continued before the silence sharpened. I'm not insulting you. Your father refused several reasonable offers. He believed sentiment could be maintained like inventory. It cannot. He is dead. Yes, Nolan said, and debts are not. After Nolan left, Barrett returned to the office behind the stockroom. He opened Amos's ledgers and began working through the numbers properly. The first problem was a business line of credit Amos had used to keep inventory moving during 2 slow winters. The second was a roof repair and electrical upgrade completed the previous autumn. The third was a long list of unpaid customer accounts. Some were small, $12, $23, $48. Others had grown across years. What disturbed Barrett was not the debt itself. It was the notation beside many names. Paid. The bank deposits did not match. No checks appeared in the account. No cash entries had been recorded. Amos had marked hundreds of dollars as settled without receiving money. Barrett searched 3 ledgers and found the same pattern. Paid, paid, paid. It looked less like bookkeeping than denial. By late afternoon, anger had replaced exhaustion. He stood behind the counter with one ledger open and another pressed flat beneath his hand. Amos had left him a store weakened by generosity, pride, or incompetence, perhaps all 3. He had repaired half the town while letting his own roof leak and his own accounts decay. Barrett had spent years believing his father chose the store over him. Now it seemed Amos had not even chosen the store. He had chosen everyone. The bell above the door rang. Evie returned. She held the packet of screws from earlier unopened. These are right, she said. The wood is wrong. Barrett stared at her. What does that mean? The rail pulled from the wall. I think the plaster is giving way. He opened the ledger. Her name appeared twice. One entry listed lumber, brackets, and labor for a new handrail. The total was substantial. The amount received was less than 1/4. Beside the balance, Amos had written P.I.'d. Barrett turned the ledger toward her. You didn't pay him. Evie's face changed, not with guilt, with dignity preparing for injury. I paid what I could. He marked the rest settled. I know. Why? Evie looked toward the front window, where Rivet was trying to climb into the glove bin. My daughter wanted me to move to assisted living after I fell. Barrett said nothing. Amos installed the rail, added a light above the back steps, and repaired the porch boards. He said a house should not become dangerous just because the person inside it got older. That doesn't explain why he didn't collect. I told him I would pay monthly. And he stopped accepting it. Barrett closed the ledger harder than necessary. That was not his decision to make. No, Evie said. It was his decision not to take it. He was running a business. He was also running out of time. The words quieted him. Evie's blue eyes did not soften. He knew I wanted to die in my own house, Barrett. Not in a room where people called me by a number because names took too long. Her fingers tightened around the packet of screws. Your father was very good at helping other people remain in their homes. She looked directly at him. He just never learned how to make his own son want to remain in his. Rivet stopped moving. The puppy stood near the glove bin, watching Barrett with his head tilted. Something passed through Barrett that felt too sharp to be grief and too old to be anger. He wanted to answer Evie. Instead, he looked down at the ledger. When he raised his head, she had already turned toward the door. Tuesday morning arrived with pale sunlight and a cold wind off the water. At exactly 10 minutes past 9, Orrin Bell entered Wren & Son Hardware. Orrin was 76, tall and thin, despite the slight bend in his back. His silver hair was combed carelessly beneath a faded cap, and a white mustache framed a mouth built equally for dry humor and stubborn silence. Fine sawdust clung to the shoulders of his red flannel shirt. A short carpenter's pencil rested behind one ear, and a small hearing aid showed beneath the hair on the other side. He carried a wooden toolbox worn smooth at the corners. Barrett had known him all his childhood. Orrin had once lifted him high enough to hang the first Christmas wreath above the store door. He had also attended Amos's funeral without speaking more than 12 words. Orrin placed 3 items on the counter: a packet of sandpaper, a box of brass nails, a peppermint bar. Barrett looked at them. "You still buy the same things, only on Tuesdays. Do you need them? Need is a dangerous standard. By that measure, half this town would own 1 chair and no dessert." Rivet emerged from beneath the counter. The puppy froze, his nose lifted. Then he ran directly to Orrin, caught the cuff of the old man's pants in his teeth, and pulled backward. Orrin went completely still. His weathered face lost color. He looked down at Rivet with an expression Barrett could not identify at first. Relief, pain, recognition. "So," Orrin whispered. "Amos managed to." He stopped. Barrett's attention sharpened. Managed to what? Orrin bent slowly and touched Rivet between the ears. "It does not matter now. It matters to me. You have already decided to sell. That has nothing to do with the dog." Orrin straightened. "It may have everything to do with him." Barrett's patience broke. "You and my father spent 20 years speaking in unfinished sentences. Then he died, and now you stand here doing the same thing." Orrin's eyes hardened. "You think silence belonged only to Amos?" Barrett stared at him. "You left, Barrett," I wrote. "Christmas cards with no return address are not conversations." I called 3 times in 19 years. The store seemed suddenly too small. Orrin's voice lowered. "You and Amos were the same kind of proud. Both of you waited for the other man to become brave first." Barrett stepped back from the counter. Orrin collected his purchases. He left the wooden toolbox behind. Neither man noticed immediately. Rivet did. The puppy sniffed the box repeatedly, pressing his nose along one side panel. Then he began scratching at a narrow seam in the wood. Barrett redirected him once. Rivet returned. The side panel was already loose. Barrett worked it free with a flat screwdriver. Inside the hollow space lay a faded photograph. Amos, younger and broad-shouldered, stood beside Orrin in front of a house blackened by fire. Between them was Barrett's mother, her dark hair tied beneath a scarf, one hand resting on a stack of salvaged lumber. Barrett barely remembered the fire. On the back, in his mother's handwriting, were the words, "The day we decided, no one in Briar Harbor should have to repair a home alone." Laurel entered while Barrett was still holding the photograph. He showed it to her. Who was we? Laurel studied the image. Not only Amos and Orrin. Her finger rested near Barrett's mother. She started it. Before Barrett could ask what that meant, Rivet ran to the front door. The puppy stood with both paws against the glass, staring toward the road that curved behind the block toward Orrin's workshop. A low sound came from his throat. Not a bark, not fear. Something closer to longing. Barrett looked from the puppy to the photograph in his hand. For the first time, the question was no longer whether Rivet had belonged to Amos. The question was how many parts of his father's life had continued without him. Ruth remained at Dr. Samuel Brody's clinic overnight. The warmed oxygen had steadied her breathing, but Samuel wanted to monitor her lungs until morning. Everett refused the motel room Iris offered and rejected 3 separate invitations from neighbors with the same brief answer: "I have somewhere to be." The place he meant was Mercy General Store. Della Crane decided the small room behind the stockroom was suitable before anyone else had a chance to disagree. "It has a cot, a radiator, and a door that closes," she said. "That makes it more luxurious than half the roadside motels between here and Fargo." Everett stood beside the counter with his shoulders hunched inside his old dark brown work coat. His red-brown flannel shirt had lost a button near the collar, and the knees of his gray work trousers carried permanent traces of grease. Without his better hearing aid, he tilted his head whenever someone spoke, pretending the movement was impatience rather than necessity. "I once rebuilt a transmission in a chicken shed," he said. "I can survive your hospitality." "Good," Della replied. The chickens complained less. Harlan reopened the store the next morning because the building needed heat. Everett needed somewhere to stay, and the dogs needed more space than the room behind the counter. He did not hang an open sign. He simply unlocked the door. In Mercy Ridge, that was enough. The news of Sable and her 3 puppies traveled faster than any official announcement. By 9 o'clock, the brass bell above the entrance rang every few minutes. People arrived claiming they needed batteries, soup, coffee, laundry soap, or wool socks. Most purchased something. Nearly all stayed longer than the purchase required. Harlan watched them gather near the cast-iron stove, carrying snow on their boots and curiosity on their faces. He had spent years entering crowded rooms by identifying exits, obstacles, and hands that might conceal danger. Now he found himself studying different signs. Who poured coffee for whom? Who moved closer to Everett but avoided asking directly about Ruth? Who touched the worn oak counter as though greeting an old friend? Button discovered commerce before Harlan did. The 6-week-old male German shepherd had a dark face, a mostly black back, and a small tan patch around his left front paw that looked like a mitten. He was round-bodied, fearless, and convinced that every glove entering the store had been delivered personally for his inspection. His first theft belonged to Iris. The sheriff had placed 1 black leather duty glove on the counter while speaking to Harlan. Button rose silently from beneath a display of canned beans, seized the glove, and disappeared behind a flour sack. Iris looked down. "Did your dog just steal county property?" "He has not completed the paperwork for adoption," Harlan said. Button returned several minutes later and took 1 glove from a young mail carrier who was too amused to resist. By noon, he had acquired 2 unmatched wool gloves belonging to Wade Ellison. Wade was 71, a broad-shouldered former truck driver and Army veteran with a square, weathered face, short silver hair, and a thick gray mustache. Age had softened his middle, but not his posture. He wore a brown canvas jacket over a faded denim shirt, dark jeans, and heavy work boots polished by years of use rather than care. Wade had driven freight across the northern plains for nearly 4 decades. His wife's death had made him harder with people, though most residents mistook hardness for certainty. He believed a person should pay his bills, maintain his property, and avoid making private trouble into public obligation. When Button stole the 2nd glove, Wade looked beneath the counter and said, "That animal has poor judgment." Button wagged. "He took yours twice," Della observed. "Perhaps he has excellent judgment." Harlan placed an empty produce crate near the register and wrote on a piece of cardboard, "Gloves confiscated. By Button. Identify your own." Midge, the smallest puppy, contributed nothing to the crime wave. The pale-faced female climbed into a bin of discounted scarves, turned twice, and fell asleep beneath a purple wool muffler. Only her black muzzle remained visible. Tinker, the other male, had ears that leaned in different directions and the confidence of a much larger animal. He found a loose end on a roll of paper towels and carried it down 3 aisles, leaving a white trail behind him. Sable watched from the faded rug beside the counter. Her lean black and tan body had begun to relax in the warmth. Yet every time the bell rang, her amber eyes lifted. She examined each person entering, then looked toward the door as though comparing them with someone who still had not arrived. Harlan noticed. He also noticed that Everett did not, or pretended not to. By late morning, the store sounded alive. Coffee poured, the stove clicked. People laughed when Tinker became trapped beneath his own paper trail. But beneath the humor lay an uneasiness no one wanted to name. Ruth was still at the clinic. The Morrow house was still cold, and a company most people had never heard of was already speaking about it as property rather than home. Della opened the ledger Harlan had found beneath the floor. She ran one finger down a page and smiled without humor. Your mother never called this the credit book. What did she call it? The remembering book. Harlan looked at the entries. The balances appeared in black ink. The notes beside them were written in blue. Drove Marion to Bismarck after surgery. Repaired delivery truck during harvest. Watched Mercy while Walter was hospitalized. Left soup on Ruth's porch without signing the card. The names continued through decades. Some debts had never been repaid in money. Others had been answered so many times that no person could say who owed whom. Harlan had grown up believing his parents were poor business people because they extended credit beyond reason. Now he understood that the store had operated according to another kind of accounting. His father remembered who fixed the furnace. His mother remembered who sat with a frightened patient. The ledger did not preserve debt. It preserved evidence that no one in Mercy had survived entirely alone. Everett sat near the stove, warming his deformed hands around a coffee cup. 12 years ago, he said, the roof over our kitchen leaked so badly, Ruth used 3 cooking pots every time it rained. Della glanced at him. You told everyone those were decorative. They were well arranged. Everett explained that a local bank had offered a repair program for older homeowners. The loan paid for roof work and a replacement heating unit. Walter Vey helped Everett understand the forms and arranged for a small emergency fund to cover the first payments. The loan carried a secondary lien against the house. Everett disliked that part, but the banker said the balance would be small and manageable. For years, Everett paid every month. Then the bank closed. The loan moved to another company, then another. Statements changed colors. Account numbers changed. Payment addresses moved across state lines. The balance should have nearly disappeared. Instead, fees began to grow. Everett kept receipts in a metal tin, but several had faded. Others had been lost when a pipe burst in the basement. I should have kept better records, he said. Harlan heard no excuse in his voice, only shame. You repaired machinery for half the county, Harlan said. That does not make you a records clerk. It made me a man who knew better than to trust a machine without checking the numbers. Everett looked toward the puppies. Apparently paper is a machine, too. The bell rang. Sable stood. The change in her was immediate. Her head lowered slightly, her mouth closed. The fur along her shoulders lifted, not in rage but attention. A man entered, wearing a tailored charcoal wool coat untouched by the stains that seemed to find everyone else in Mercy. Conrad Pell was 42, tall without appearing physically imposing, with a narrow, carefully shaved face and brown hair combed neatly away from his forehead. His eyes were pale gray, cool rather than openly cruel. A white shirt showed above the collar of his coat, and his polished leather shoes carried only a light dusting of snow. He looked like a man who believed preparation could remove disorder from life. His voice was quiet and practiced. "Mr. Morrow." Sable stepped between Conrad and Everett. She did not bark. She planted all 4 feet near the edge of the rug and watched him. Conrad stopped. "I assume she is friendly." "No," Wade said from the coffee station. "She has standards." Conrad ignored him. He introduced himself as regional representative for North Prairie Asset Recovery. He removed a thin folder from his coat but did not immediately open it. "I came to discuss an alternative before the matter becomes more expensive." Everett's shoulders tightened. Harlan moved closer but remained behind the counter. "What alternative?" Conrad turned his calm gaze toward him. "You must be Harlan Vey. You know who I am. Mercy is a small town." Della folded her arms. "Small towns have secrets. We simply decide who deserves to hear them." A faint line appeared between Conrad's eyebrows. It vanished almost immediately. He addressed Everett again. North Prairie would reduce part of the disputed fees if Everett and Ruth agreed to a voluntary transfer of title within 7 days. The company would suspend litigation, provide limited moving assistance, and arrange contact with an assisted living placement service. The language was smooth. No threats, no mention of eviction, only solutions offered in a tone that made refusal sound unreasonable. Everett stared at the folder. How much would remain? Less than the current balance. "That was not his question," Harlan said. Conrad looked at him. "The exact figure would depend on signing date and closing expenses. So you want the house before telling them the price. I want to prevent additional costs from consuming what little equity remains." Sable shifted when Conrad moved 1 foot nearer. His gaze dropped to her folded left ear. "This dog has been photographed at the Morrow property before." The room quieted. Harlan looked at Sable. "What photograph?" "One of the inspection records. You went there?" "I review files, Mr. Vey." "That is not an answer. It is the relevant answer." Conrad opened the folder and placed a form on the counter. Everett leaned forward. Sable moved with him, keeping her body between the old man and the papers. For one strange second, Harlan felt that the dog was not protecting Everett from Conrad's hands. She was protecting him from the empty line waiting for his signature. Conrad's voice softened. "Mr. Morrow, your wife nearly died in that house. The heating system failed. The utility service was disconnected. The property requires repairs you cannot afford." Everett looked toward the clinic through the frosted front window, though Ruth was several blocks away. Something changed in his face. Not surrender. Weariness. Harlan recognized it because he had seen exhausted men accept dangerous choices simply to stop choosing. Conrad continued. "Staying longer will not make the situation safer." Everett reached for the paper. Harlan's hand moved before he had fully decided. Lena Quaid entered at that moment. She crossed the store quickly, her worn leather file bag against one hip. "Do not sign that until you have independent advice." Everett's hand stopped. Conrad turned. "This is a voluntary proposal, and he is voluntarily entitled to understand it." Lena stood beside Everett, not in front of him. The distinction mattered. Harlan said, "Tell him not to sign." Lena looked at Harlan. "No." His frustration sharpened. "You know what they're doing. I know what the document may do. Everett decides whether to sign after he understands his choices. If he signs, he loses the house. If you order him not to sign, you are still deciding that his house matters more than what he believes is best for Ruth." The words hit harder because they were spoken quietly. Harlan saw his father seated behind the same counter years earlier, refusing the brochures Harlan had brought. He had called those brochures choices. Then he had argued until only one choice remained acceptable. Harlan lowered his hand. Lena turned to Everett. "You do not have to answer today. You have the right to review the accounting, contest the fees, and speak with counsel. You also have the right to sell or transfer the house if that is what you truly choose." Everett studied her face. "You won't tell me what to do? No, that makes you less useful than most people. Usually." A small smile touched Everett's mouth. Conrad withdrew the form. "The offer remains open for 7 days." As he turned, Wade spoke from beside the stove. "He should take it." Several people looked at him. Wade did not retreat. "The house nearly killed Ruth. Everett cannot repair it. Everybody in here is treating stubbornness like a sacred object because it belongs to an old man." Della's voice cooled. "You believe people should be forced from their homes when repairs become difficult. I believe other people should not be drafted into paying for choices they did not make." Polly, who had arrived with fresh food for Everett, said, "No one has asked you to pay. Not yet." The store divided in a way Harlan had not expected. Some believed Everett deserved help because he had helped others. Some believed kindness could not replace responsibility. Others remained silent because they feared seeing their own future in the argument. Everett listened to all of it. His face grew more closed with each sentence. Harlan wanted to end the debate, but he understood that Mercy was not a collection of naturally generous people waiting for the chance to agree. It was a town of frightened individuals with different ideas about what fear permitted. Conrad reached the door. Before leaving, he looked once at Sable. "Interesting," he said. The inspection photograph showed her outside the kitchen window. Harlan asked, "What date?" Conrad's hand rested on the door. "You will receive the full records through the proper process." Then he stepped into the cold. The bell rang once behind him. Sable remained standing until his car disappeared. Everett took the metal tin from beneath his coat and placed it on the counter. The box was dented at one corner and smelled faintly of oil. Inside were receipts, bank statements, repair invoices, and a folded letter in Walter Vay's handwriting. Harlan unfolded it carefully. "Everett, if there comes a day when they use this loan to take your house, give this letter to my son." The sentence ended near the middle of the page. The bottom half had been torn away. Harlan looked up. "Was it like this when you received it?" "No. Who else knew about it?" "Ruth, your father. Maybe your mother. Where did you keep it?" "In the tin, under the loose board in the cabinet." Harlan remembered Sable scratching at the cabinet in the Morrow house. Everett's pale eyes moved toward the antique cash register on the counter. "Your father thought the balance was only a bookkeeping mistake at first." And then, Everett did not answer immediately. Around them, people began reclaiming gloves from Button's crate. Midge slept beneath the scarves. Tinker chewed the cardboard edge of a soup display. The store seemed ordinary again. But Harlan could feel everyone listening. Everett looked at the old brass register. Then Walter found other names. By the following morning, Mercy General's store no longer felt reopened. It felt occupied. Coffee steamed near the register. Boots left damp crescents on the floorboards. The puppies had established territories without permission. Midge slept in the scarf bin. Tinker patrolled beneath the shelves. And Button treated every hand entering the store as a possible source of leather. Sable remained on the worn rug beside the counter. She rested more often now, but her amber eyes followed every conversation involving Everett. Ruth was still recovering at the clinic. Everett moved between the back room and the stove, with the stiff dignity of a man determined to behave as though nothing in his life had changed. Everything had. Lena Quaid turned the small office behind the stockroom into a temporary document room. She covered the desk with loan statements, payment receipts, transfer notices, and photocopied inspection reports. Her dark brown hair remained tied low, though several loose strands had fallen along her cheeks. A pencil rested behind one ear. She read with the unhurried concentration of someone who distrusted every number until it survived 3 questions. Harlan stood across from her. "How bad is it?" "That depends on whether you mean the original loan, the current balance, or the record keeping." "All 3. The original loan was legal. Small home repair loan, secured by a secondary lien. Everett paid regularly for years. And then the bank closed." Lena nodded. "The account moved through 2 servicing companies before North Prairie acquired it. Somewhere during the second transfer, the remaining balance was entered incorrectly." "How incorrectly?" "By several $1,000s. Harlan looked toward the front of the store, where Everett was showing Tinker how not to chew a bootlace. "Then we prove that and stop the foreclosure." Lena did not answer immediately. She turned one page. "The wrong balance is only the beginning. North Prairie added inspection charges, monitoring fees, property preservation fees, legal review fees, and penalties. Most of them depend on the house being considered vacant or at risk of abandonment. The house was never vacant. I know. They know. That is the question." Harlan leaned over the desk. "You have the January photograph." "We have one obviously inaccurate photograph. That should be enough. It is enough to raise suspicion. It is not enough to prove intent." The distinction irritated him. In the world Harlan understood, a false picture was a false picture. A forged position on a map could kill a team. A wrong number could send men to the wrong building. The idea that someone might call such a thing an administrative error felt like cowardice disguised as procedure. Lena slid 4 more files toward him. "These are from other homeowners in the county." The names were unfamiliar. All 4 belonged to people over 70. The statements used nearly identical language. Unable to confirm occupancy. Exterior inspection required. Preservation review initiated. The amounts differed, but the structure was the same. 4 more, Harlan said. 4 we know about. So it is a pattern. It may be. It is. Lena looked at him. A pattern in your mind is not yet a pattern in court. Harlan straightened. Then we tell everyone. We put copies on the wall. We call the paper. No. The answer was so flat it stopped him. No. If North Prairie learns exactly what we have, they may correct the records, replace the reports, or claim a software conversion error. They may also contact the other homeowners before we do. You want to wait. I want to preserve evidence, while they keep adding fees, while we build something that survives longer than one angry afternoon. Harlan looked away. Waiting had never felt neutral to him. Waiting meant giving danger time to move. It meant listening to someone breathe through pain while another person decided whether permission had been granted. But Lena was not hesitating. She was constructing. He knew the difference. He simply did not like it. The store's own problems arrived before noon. A supplier called to demand payment on 2 overdue invoices. The roofer, who inspected the rear storage wing, found water damage beneath the metal flashing. The business account remained partly restricted until the estate transfer was finalized. Property taxes were due within 6 weeks. Della brought in another piece of news. A regional logistics company had purchased 2 parcels near the highway and had begun asking about commercial lots with loading access. Mercy General Store has a rear yard, road frontage, and storage space, she said, which means somebody in a clean office has probably called it underused. Harlan studied the books. His parents had not left him a profitable business. They had left him a building held together by patched wood, unpaid kindness, and the stubborn habit of people continuing to walk through the door. He found dozens of transactions where the store had absorbed costs for customers who never paid in full. His mother had covered groceries. His father had delayed repairs to keep heating fuel in stock. The store had survived not because it earned enough. It survived because suppliers had been patient, neighbors had repaired things cheaply, and his parents had accepted less for themselves. Harlan had once believed sacrifice looked dramatic. Here, it looked like a roof left unfixed so an old woman could buy medicine. He closed the ledger. What did they think would happen? Della answered from the doorway. They thought tomorrow would give them another chance. That is not a plan. No, she said. It is faith with poor bookkeeping. The brass bell rang. Sable rose before Harlan looked toward the door. Conrad Pell entered, carrying no folder this time. His charcoal coat was buttoned neatly to the throat. Snow had melted along the shoulders but left no visible stain. His narrow face held the same professional calm as before. Harlan did not invite him farther. What do you want? To discuss your position. My position is behind this counter. Conrad glanced around the store. Temporarily, Sable stood, but instead of watching Conrad, she looked at Harlan. Her attention unsettled him more than a growl would have. Conrad removed a single envelope from inside his coat. North Prairie is aware the store carries outstanding commercial obligations. How? Public records, supplier filings, estate documents. You make a habit of reading the financial history of every rural store, only those attached to potentially useful property. Della muttered something unkind near the coffee pot. Conrad placed the envelope on the counter. North Prairie can acquire the business debt, settle the supplier claims, and assist with a rapid sale of the property. Harlan did not touch it. What is the condition? You cease interfering in the Morrow account. The room quieted. Conrad continued in the same measured tone. You provide no documents to Ms. Quaid. Make no public allegations, and allow the account to proceed through ordinary channels. Ordinary. Yes, you mean the channels that turned $300 into $19,000. Conrad's jaw tightened by a fraction. You do not know the verified balance. I know enough. You know a grieving couple failed to maintain their property and records. You know your parents carried debts this store could not afford. You know emotion has already replaced judgment in this building. Harlan stepped around the counter. Conrad did not move. You do not need to lose your parents' property, he said, because two people failed to manage their finances. Harlan's right hand closed. The movement was small. Sable rose fully. She did not face Conrad. She faced Harlan. Her amber eyes fixed on his hand. The room narrowed around him. For half a second he saw a different place. Concrete walls, harsh light. A man speaking calmly while another bled nearby. He felt the old certainty that some people only understood force. Then Sable took one step toward him, not threatening, reminding. Harlan opened his hand. Conrad saw it. So did Iris, who had entered silently behind him. Harlan's voice came out low. Take your offer. Conrad picked up the envelope. You should read it first. I heard the price. It is a way out, no. It is a way to make me useful to you. Conrad turned toward the door. At the threshold he paused. Your father was offered a way out, too. Harlan went still. By whom? Conrad looked over one shoulder. He never told you the bell rang as he left. For several seconds no one spoke. Harlan watched the glass door until Conrad's car disappeared. The remark could have been manipulation. It worked anyway. His father had known something. Perhaps more than Everett remembered. Perhaps more than the torn letter suggested. By evening, the store had emptied. Ruth had been kept one more night for observation. Everett went to the clinic with Polly. Della took the puppies to the back room long enough for Harlan to clean. Iris found him near the counter with the for sale sign propped against a flower display. "You put that there to remind yourself?" she asked. "To remind everyone." "Of what?" "That this is still a building." Iris removed her navy winter cap. Her dark hair remained tied low, and fatigue showed beneath her eyes. Harlan pointed toward the accounts. "I could sell, pay the suppliers, use part of the money to help Everett challenge the debt, and then leave. That was always the plan. Before or after you started caring." He looked at her. "That does not change the math." "No, it changes why you are doing it." "I am trying to solve the problem." Iris leaned against the counter. "Are you saving the morrows or buying permission to leave without feeling guilty?" Anger rose faster than he expected. "You think staying in this store proves something?" "I think you have spent your life confusing departure with control. You know nothing about my life. I know what you said to your father." The words struck harder because she did not raise her voice. Harlan looked toward the dark window. He was sick. He was frightened. He needed safer housing. He needed his son to listen. "I was trying to keep him alive, and Everett hears the same thing now." Another younger man explaining why his life belongs to whoever worries most. Harlan turned away. "I am not forcing Everett to do anything. Not yet." The store creaked in the cold. Iris softened. "Your father was not always right. Everett is not always right, but helping someone does not begin with proving you can arrange their life better." Harlan said nothing. After Iris left, the silence returned in layers. The puppies settled near the stove. Sable lay beside them. Button remained awake, chewing the edge of something dark. Harlan noticed too late. "Drop it." Button darted away with the old leather glove that had belonged to Walter Vey. Harlan followed him through the stockroom. The puppy squeezed behind a low shelf and began pawing at a loose floorboard. The scent of old leather had drawn him there before, but this time he pushed farther beneath the gap. Harlan moved the shelf. One plank lifted under his fingers. A folded piece of paper lay underneath. He unfolded it. The handwriting belonged to his father. It was the missing lower half of the letter. Walter had separated the message deliberately. Everett kept the warning. The store kept the proof. The page explained that Walter had compared several home repair loans after customers brought him confusing statements. Multiple balances had changed after transfer. Fees appeared without supporting records. Walter had copied figures from the old bank before its files disappeared into new servicing systems. He had hidden a reconciliation ledger. The final sentence read, "It rests where everyone looks each day, but no one believes anything remains inside." Harlan returned to the main room. He studied the brass bell, the wall clock, the wooden sign, the coffee cabinet, then the framed family photograph. Walter stood behind the counter with one hand resting on the antique cash register. Harlan crossed to it. The machine had not worked in 20 years. Its brass keys were dull, and the drawer had been used only to store spare receipt paper. He felt beneath the base. A narrow lock sat behind a warped wooden panel. The key from his mother's estate ring fit. Inside was a thin black ledger wrapped in waxed cloth. Harlan carried it to the counter and opened it. Columns of account numbers filled the pages, original balances, payments, remaining amounts before transfer. He found Everett Morrow. The remaining debt had been $312, not $19,000. Harlan called Lena. She arrived 40 minutes later, with snow caught in her hair and exhaustion in her face. He placed the ledger before her. "This ends it." Lena read the entry. Then she turned several pages. Her expression did not change. "It proves the balance was wrong. That is what I said. It proves someone received incorrect numbers. They added fees to numbers that were already false. Yes, so we have them." Lena closed the book carefully. "We still need to prove North Prairie knew." The telephone rang. Harlan answered. An older woman spoke in a whisper. "I used to enter those numbers." Her voice trembled. Harlan straightened. "Who is this?" She seemed to listen to something beyond the line. "They did not choose the houses randomly," she said. "They chose people who—" A sound interrupted her, a door opening, a breath. Then the call ended. The woman who had called Mercy General Store gave her name the next morning. Marjorie Pike. She refused to speak on the store telephone again. Instead, she left a message through Lena's legal aid office, requesting a meeting at a roadside diner 40 miles west of Mercy Ridge. No address was written in the message, only a time, the name of the diner, and one warning. "Do not bring anyone from the company." By noon, the winter sky had turned a clear, hard blue. Sunlight lay across the highway, but loose snow still crossed the pavement in silver threads. Harlan drove with Lena beside him, and Iris in the rear seat. Sable rested behind the passenger side, her lean black and tan body balanced against every turn. Harlan had argued that the dog should remain at the store. Sable had responded by sitting in front of the truck door. Iris had watched the disagreement for nearly a minute before saying, "You seem to be losing authority in several areas of your life." The diner stood beside an abandoned fuel station, a low white building with red trim and a neon coffee cup flickering in the window. Only 3 vehicles sat outside. Marjorie was supposed to arrive at 1. At 1:15, her booth remained empty. At 1:30, Harlan checked the parking lot again. Lena sat with a cup of tea untouched between her hands. Iris drank coffee and watched the highway through the reflection in the window. "She changed her mind," Harlan said. "Perhaps," Lena replied. "Or someone reached her first." Iris looked at him. "You do not know that. She ended the call because someone entered the room. She may have been afraid of a neighbor, a family member, or her own imagination. Fear does not change what she knows." "No," Iris said. "But the way you treat that fear may decide whether she ever tells you." Harlan looked away. He disliked the sentence because it sounded reasonable. He disliked reasonable sentences most when they required patience. At 1:42, an older sedan entered the parking lot. It stopped far from the door, engine running. The driver remained inside for almost 3 minutes. Then a woman stepped out. Marjorie Pike was 68, of average height, but made smaller by the way she held her shoulders inward. She wore a brown wool coat, polished smooth at the elbows, a cream scarf, dark slacks, and low winter boots. Her steel-gray hair was cut to her jaw and tucked carefully behind both ears. Thin gold-framed glasses rested on a narrow face with soft lines around the mouth. Her pale blue eyes moved constantly between the diner windows, the highway, and the cars around her. She carried a large black handbag against her chest. Marjorie looked like a woman who had spent years making herself unobtrusive in rooms where being noticed carried a price. When she entered, Harlan stood. Her attention went first to Iris's sheriff's coat, then to Sable. Marjorie stopped so suddenly that the bell above the door struck twice behind her. No dogs. Sable remained beside the booth. "She will stay back," Harlan said. "I was bitten when I was 9. Marjorie's right hand moved unconsciously toward her left wrist. A pale crescent scar crossed the skin above her glove. Harlan reached for Sable's harness. The shepherd looked at Marjorie, then lowered herself several feet from the table. She turned her head away and placed her chin on her front paws. No approach, no staring, no demand. Marjorie watched the dog for a long moment. She understands distance, Harlan said. Marjorie chose the seat farthest from Sable. A waitress poured coffee. Marjorie did not touch it. I worked for North Prairie for 11 years, she began. Data processing, account conversion, property status review. Her voice was soft, precise, and strained by the effort of continuing. When loan portfolios came in, we matched addresses, payment histories, and lien records. At least, that was what we were supposed to do. What changed? Lena asked, volume. Targets. Management language. Marjorie opened her handbag, but kept one hand inside it. They began assigning risk scores. Not risk that the borrower would damage the property. Risk that the borrower would resist. Harlan leaned forward. What made someone low resistance? Marjorie counted quietly on her fingers. Over 70. Rural address. No attorney listed. Few recent phone contacts. Mail returned. Small remaining balance. Property worth more than the debt. No adult child nearby. Widow, widower, or older couple living alone. Lena's expression hardened. They were selecting people likely to surrender. They called it efficiency. Marjorie looked toward the highway. An ordinary foreclosure could take time. A voluntary transfer was faster. The fees made the balance feel impossible. Then a representative offered relief. Conrad, Harlan said. He did not design it. But he knew. Yes, the answer came without hesitation. He signed approval batches. He received weekly reports. He questioned a few accounts in the beginning, then stopped. Why? Marjorie's fingers tightened around the handbag strap. Because the numbers rewarded him. She explained that outside property inspectors sometimes failed to visit remote addresses. When that happened, employees were told to complete reports using older photographs from county property records, insurance files, or previous listings. The language was always careful. Exterior condition could not be verified. Occupancy uncertain. Preservation review recommended. No one wrote, "We did not go there." Instead, the system produced a document that looked complete. Harlan thought of the summer flowers in the January photograph. How many homes? I do not know the total. You worked there 11 years. I did not see every portfolio. How many did you see? Marjorie's eyes dropped. Enough. The word carried more shame than any number. Lena spoke gently. Why contact us now? Marjorie looked at Sable. The shepherd remained motionless, giving her the same quiet space she had given the mother dog on the road. I saw the emergency notice about the Morrow house, Marjorie said. Then I saw the store name. Mercy General Store, Marjorie nodded. It was added to a commercial acquisition list. I remembered Walter Vey. Harlan went still. You knew my father, only through calls. He argued about account transfers. He asked for original balances. He would not accept summaries. A faint, sad smile touched her mouth. He once kept me on the telephone for 47 minutes because one payment was missing from a ledger. That sounds like him. He said, numbers were only honest if they remembered the people who paid them. The sentence reached Harlan before he could defend himself. For a moment, the diner disappeared. He saw his father behind the counter, one hand on the old register, refusing to let a stranger turn a neighbor into an account number. Marjorie continued. The company did not only target poor people. Poor people sometimes had advocates. Churches, family, public programs. Then who? Iris asked. The ones least likely to make noise. Marjorie glanced around the diner, though no one sat near them. Internally, the category was low resistance. She paused, but Meredith Sloan used another word during meetings. Harlan waited. Marjorie's voice dropped. Quiet. The word seemed too small for what it carried. Quiet people. Quiet houses. Quiet disappearances from records no one else examined. Harlan understood then that North Prairie had not simply found vulnerable homeowners. It had measured the likelihood that anyone would notice when they were pushed out. Marjorie removed a black portable drive from her handbag and placed it on the table. It contains internal emails, sample reports, target lists, and communications between Conrad and Meredith. Lena did not touch it. How did you obtain these? I copied files I was assigned to process. Were you authorized to remove them? No. Iris leaned back slightly. That matters, I know. Marjorie reached for the drive, then stopped. If I give you this, they could sue me. They could challenge my pension. My daughter already thinks I have become suspicious of everyone. Harlan felt impatience rise. People may lose their homes. Marjorie flinched. You think I do not know that? Then give us the evidence. Her face changed, not anger at first, recognition. She closed her handbag and stood. I made a mistake coming. Harlan rose as well. You called us, and they told me the same thing, that I had a duty, that the consequences were too important for my fear to matter. They were protecting the company, and you are deciding what courage should cost me. Marjorie moved toward the door. Sable did not stand. She did not block the path. As Marjorie passed, the dog lowered her head completely to her paws and looked away. Marjorie slowed. The shepherd had made herself smaller, safe, patient. She was not asking the woman to trust. She was allowing her not to. Marjorie stopped with one hand on the door. When she turned back, her eyes were wet. You are not as different from them as you think, she told Harlan. They also said, I had to do the right thing in the way they chose. Harlan felt Iris watching him. He could have defended himself. He did not. You are right, he said. Marjorie waited. I am sorry. No explanation followed. No mention of urgency. No attempt to make the apology useful. Marjorie returned to the table. She sat for another minute before pushing the drive toward Lena. I made a second copy. Where? Lena asked. Marjorie touched the edge of her cream scarf. If the large thing disappears, do not throw away the soft one. Harlan did not understand. Lena appeared to, but said nothing. They left separately. Marjorie drove east. Harlan, Lena, Iris, and Sable returned toward Mercy Ridge. 20 miles from town, a dark pickup appeared behind them. It remained at the same distance through 3 turns. Harlan checked the mirror again. You see it? Iris asked. Yes. Do not react. I am driving. You are hunting. The pickup moved closer. Wind swept snow across the highway, briefly hiding its headlights. Then it accelerated and passed with little clearance. Harlan steered away. The truck's right tires dropped onto the icy shoulder. The rear slid. He corrected once, controlled the movement, and brought the vehicle to a stop against a shallow snowbank. No collision. No injuries. The dark pickup continued without slowing. Sable stood braced behind the seats, ears forward but silent. Iris recorded the partial plate number. Could have been reckless driving, she said. Could have been more. Could have. We prove before we accuse. Harlan checked the vehicle. Nothing appeared damaged. They continued to Mercy. At the store, Lena opened her file bag. The black drive was gone. She searched the seats, the floor, and every pocket. Harlan looked toward the road. They took it. Iris's voice remained controlled. We do not know that. It was in the bag. The bag opened when the truck slid. No one came near us. Then it may still be in the vehicle. They searched again. Nothing. Harlan struck one palm against the counter. We had it. Sable lifted her head. The puppies stopped playing. Della emerged from the stockroom carrying Marjorie's cream scarf. She left this in the booth, she said. The waitress gave it to Iris before we left. Harlan remembered Marjorie's words. Do not throw away the soft one. Della examined the scarf. She had sewn postal uniform patches for years, and knew the difference between factory stitching and a nervous hand. "This seam is new." She opened a short section of the lining. A tiny memory card slid into her palm. Marjorie had expected the larger drive to disappear. She had not come to the diner waiting for someone else to rescue her courage. She had arrived with a plan. Lena copied the files onto 3 separate devices. The data revealed 47 similar properties across 3 counties. Most owners were over 65. Several lived alone. Some had medical debt. Others had small home repair liens like the Morrows. One email from Meredith Sloan read, "Rural senior borrowers rarely pursue litigation. Most vacate before understanding the fee structure." Another instructed Conrad to increase voluntary title transfers before winter. Harlan read the messages twice. Then Lena opened the commercial acquisition list. Near the bottom appeared an entry dated 2 weeks earlier. Murky General Store Commercial Distress Acquisition Candidate. The date came before Harlan found Sable on County Road 9, before he opened the store. Before he challenged Conrad. North Prairie had not targeted the property because Harlan interfered. They had already expected him to sell. Someone knew he was returning. Someone knew the store was vulnerable, and someone had been waiting for him to make the easiest choice. The notice from North Prairie arrived before breakfast. It did not look dramatic. There was no red stamp, no threatening language across the envelope, no officer waiting beside the door. The pages were white, the print small, and the wording careful enough to make danger sound like routine procedure. North Prairie Asset Recovery had filed a request concerning Mercy General Store's commercial obligations. The company sought to preserve the property, restrict certain transfers, and prevent Harlan from disposing of assets while the debt remained disputed. They could not simply lock the doors. Not yet, but an emergency hearing would decide whether Harlan could continue operating the store while the court reviewed the claims. Lena stood behind the counter reading the filing a second time. Her dark hair was tied low, and fatigue had settled beneath her brown eyes. She marked each paragraph with a pencil, pausing whenever the language attempted to hide a demand inside a polite sentence. Harlan watched the clock above the antique register. Less than 2 days. He had to show that the store was not being emptied or misused. He had to keep suppliers from suspending deliveries. He had to preserve the records Marjorie had provided. He had to support the Morrow case without making it appear that store funds were being moved to hide assets. Most of all, he had to prove that North Prairie's actions could cause immediate harm before the larger investigation had even begun. Della read the last page over Lena's shoulder. "We need a fundraiser." "No," Harlan said. The answer came too quickly. Della turned. Her brown and gray hair was pinned beneath her postal cap, and her full face carried the stubborn patience of someone who had known him too long to be impressed by sharp answers. "People will contribute. That is the problem. Since when? Since Ruth and Everett became the reason strangers might hand over money while staring at them like a sad photograph." Della folded the filing. "A fundraiser does not have to humiliate anyone. It will if we build it around 2 old people nearly freezing beside a bowl of cat food." Polly. Greer entered carrying forms for a county energy assistance program. Her brick-red coat was open over a thick sweater, and her round, kind face looked hopeful until she heard Harlan. "This could restore their service and help with heating costs," she said. Everett sat beside the stove in his dark work coat, one twisted hand resting on his cane. "No." Polly stopped. "You have not read it. I heard the word assistance. That is not an illness." "No, but people start speaking slowly to you after you accept it." Ruth had returned from the clinic that morning. She sat beside him in her plum cardigan, the striped scarf folded in her lap. Her silver hair was pinned low again, though illness had left her face thinner and her hazel eyes tired. "I do not want my medication listed on a bulletin board," she said. "No one suggested that," Polly replied. Not yet. Everett feared that accepting help would confirm what he already suspected about himself, that he was no longer the man who repaired other people's machines, that he had become the broken thing in the room. Ruth's fear was different. She believed that once people learned she had reduced her medication, hidden bills, and canceled food deliveries, every future choice she made would be examined for evidence that she could no longer decide for herself. Wade Ellison stood near the coffee station, broad shoulders filling his brown canvas coat. His gray mustache shifted when he frowned. The town cannot rescue everyone from every bad decision. Several customers looked toward him. Wade continued. Everett stopped asking questions about the loan. Ruth stopped taking her medicine. They both kept quiet. North Prairie may be crooked, but that does not make every mistake somebody else's responsibility. Polly's face tightened. They nearly died. That does not make the decisions disappear. A man near the soup shelves nodded. Another woman looked away. The store divided without anyone moving. Harlan saw how easily a community could fracture when fear entered the room wearing the language of responsibility. He also saw something else. Forcing them into agreement would solve nothing. Mercy Ridge was not a congregation waiting to be inspired by the right speech. It was made of people who had survived by different rules. Some believed help was sacred. Others believed help made people dependent. Some feared being abandoned. Others feared being used. Harlan looked at Ruth and Everett. They were not asking the town to choose a side. They were still trying not to ask for anything at all. He closed the store early that afternoon and drove them home. Temporary electrical service had been restored, but the house remained cold in its walls. A portable heater hummed in the living room. Pickles slept beside it on a folded towel, his mottled orange and gray body curled tightly, one cloudy eye opening whenever the machine clicked. Sable lay on the rug between Ruth's chair and Everett's. Her black and tan body formed a quiet bridge across the space. Neither spouse seemed able to cross with words. Harlan sat opposite them. He did not bring forms. He did not mention the hearing. He told them about Jonah Reed. Jonah had been a Navy medic attached to Harlan's unit, a man with a crooked smile and the irritating habit of singing old country songs during equipment checks. He had been 38 when a wall collapsed during an extraction overseas. Harlan had been injured first. Shrapnel entered his side, and the impact left one leg unable to carry weight. The withdrawal order came while the building continued to fail around them. Jonah was supposed to leave. Instead, he returned. He lifted Harlan across his back and carried him through dust, fire, and broken concrete while another blast tore through the corridor behind them. Jonah survived, but damage to his lower leg left him walking with a brace for the rest of his life. Harlan had spent years believing one thing. If he had not become a burden, Jonah would not have paid that price. Everett listened without moving. Ruth's fingers tightened around the edge of her scarf. Harlan looked down at his hands. "I hated that he had to carry me." Everett's voice was low. "Because it hurt. Because I could not give him anything back." "That is not the same thing." It felt the same. The portable heater clicked off. The silence afterward seemed larger. Harlan continued. "Jonah used to say the worst thing was not his leg." He stopped. The words resisted him. Everett watched him carefully. "What was worse?" Harlan looked toward Sable. The shepherd had raised her head. "The worst thing was that I never visited him." Ruth's expression softened. Harlan forced himself to continue. I called twice, sent messages, told myself he needed space. The truth was that looking at him reminded me I had been saved. His voice remained steady, but something inside him did not. I thought staying away meant I would not ask anything more of him. Instead, I made his sacrifice into something I was ashamed to see. Everett lowered his gaze. Harlan did not ask him to accept money. He asked a different question. What are you most afraid of? Everett's first response was anger. Then came silence. Finally, he opened one hand and stared at the swollen joints. I cannot fix the heater. No one interrupted. I used to know what every sound meant. Belt slipping, bearing worn, fuel line choking. Now I can stand beside a machine and hear almost nothing. His remaining hearing aid gave a faint whistle. One day, Ruth will call from another room, and I will not hear her. Ruth turned toward him. Everett's voice became rough. I am afraid people will look at me and see a man whose only remaining skill is being in the way. Ruth covered her mouth. Then she spoke. I reduced my medicine because I knew what the refill cost. Everett looked at her sharply. I told you the insurance covered it. It covered part. You said it was handled. So did you about the electricity. The words might have become another argument. Instead, exhaustion stripped them of pride. Ruth admitted, hiding the last utility notice. She admitted canceling Polly's deliveries. She admitted skipping appointments, because no one could care for Pickles if she were admitted. The clinic would find somewhere for him, Harlan said. Ruth looked toward the old cat. A shelter is somewhere. Pickles lifted his head as if insulted by the discussion. He is 17, Ruth continued. He does not eat when frightened. He barely tolerates people he has known for years. I thought if I went to the hospital, I might come home to an empty bed beside the stove. Everett's face changed. You should have told me. You would have sold the house. I nearly did, to prove you were still protecting me. He looked away. They had hidden the truth from each other, because each believed love meant carrying the fear alone, and that silence had nearly killed them both. Harlan leaned forward. What if no one gives you money? Everett frowned. What are you selling? Nothing. That is rarely true. What if people bring work instead? Ruth studied him. Harlan described the idea slowly. Mercy General Store would hold an evening where people could offer what they still had. Not donations made out of pity. Commitments. A mechanic could inspect a furnace. A neighbor could deliver groceries. Someone with a truck could drive patients to medical appointments. A retired teacher could help with forms. A teenager could shovel snow. A family could agree to care for a pet during hospitalization. Everett could teach small engine repair. Ruth could organize a lending shelf and explain confusing letters. Polly could create a voluntary call list for residents who repeatedly canceled meals. No one would remain only a giver or only a receiver. Everett said nothing. Sable stood. She walked to the chair where Ruth had placed the striped scarf. The shepherd took one edge gently in her mouth and carried it to Ruth. When Ruth lifted the scarf, an old work glove dropped into her lap. Button had stolen it days earlier and hidden it among the folds. The glove belonged to Everett. The leather was dark with age and machine oil. 2 fingers had been repaired with heavy thread. Everett picked it up. His mouth opened, but no words came. Sable had remembered Ruth's scarf. Button had remembered the smell of Everett's hands. Even in their absence, something inside the store had held their place. Everett began to cry. He turned his face away, ashamed even of that. I do not know how to ask people. Harlan's answer came quietly. You do not have to say it well. Everett looked at Ruth. She reached across and took his hand. He breathed once unsteadily. We need help. The sentence was small. It changed the room. That evening, Mercy General's store filled beyond its usual capacity. Della wrote categories across large sheets of paper and taped them to the wall. Polly managed the call list. Lena collected legal documents separately from community commitments, so no one could claim the event was hiding money. Dr. Samuel Brody designed a voluntary medical information card. It listed emergency contacts, medications, pet care instructions, and consent choices. Nothing was shared without permission. Ruth placed donated books on a small shelf near the stove. Everett sat at a workbench with a teenage boy named Caleb Moss, showing him how to remove a carburetor without stripping the screws. Wade stood near the entrance for nearly 20 minutes before approaching the transportation sheet. He signed his name beside 4 medical trips. Harlan looked at him. Wade did not apologize. "I made my wife wait too long because I was afraid of the hospital bill," he said. "I won the argument about money." His gray eyes shifted toward the floor, "and lost the person I was arguing for." He capped the pen. "I am not doing that twice." The room grew warmer with bodies, coffee, and the clumsy beginnings of trust. Some brought firewood, some brought tools. A woman offered to care for cats. A retired accountant volunteered to explain statements without charging. Not everyone participated. A few people left early. That mattered too. The store was not healed by unanimous goodness. It was strengthened by enough people choosing not to remain silent. Sable rested beside the counter. Button, Midge, and Tinker slept in a heap inside the glove crate. Near closing time, Iris entered with official papers. Conrad came behind her. His charcoal coat was immaculate, but his face looked less certain when he saw the crowded walls covered in names and commitments. Iris served him with an order requiring preservation of relevant company records. She also informed Harlan and Lena that the emergency hearing had been scheduled for the following morning. Conrad looked around the store. The people North Prairie had treated as separate accounts were speaking to one another, comparing letters, matching fees, recognizing the same language. His company had depended on each person believing the problem belonged only to them. That advantage was disappearing. "You think one night of volunteer hours will save 47 properties?" Conrad asked Harlan. "No." A faint smile touched Conrad's mouth. Then Harlan continued, "But tomorrow 47 people will know they were sent the same lie." The smile vanished. After Conrad left, a process server handed Lena the hearing notice. The court would not decide the entire case in one morning. It would decide whether North Prairie could continue collection and recovery actions while the records were investigated. If Lena and Harlan failed to show immediate risk, the Morrow foreclosure process could move forward. Mercy General Store could lose the freedom to operate while North Prairie argued over every page. The people inside the store continued writing their names on the walls. Harlan looked at them and understood the truth. They had not won. They had only reached the moment when losing would no longer happen quietly. The county courthouse stood beneath a clear winter sky, its pale stone walls reflecting so much morning light that Harlan had to narrow his eyes as he crossed the square. There were no television vans outside. No cheering crowd waited on the steps, only parked trucks, brittle snow, and a line of people entering through the metal doors with folders held against their coats. Harlan preferred it that way. Real consequences rarely arrived with music. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old wood, wet wool, and heating pipes. Ruth sat beside Everett in the second row. Her silver hair was gathered neatly at the nape of her neck, and the plum cardigan beneath her coat made her look stronger than she had a week earlier. Everett wore his red-brown flannel shirt and dark work jacket. A new temporary hearing device rested behind his right ear, though he still leaned forward whenever someone spoke. Sable lay between their boots. The 5-year-old German shepherd's black and tan body remained still, but her amber eyes followed every movement near the front of the room. Her right ear stood erect. The folded tip of her left ear angled toward Everett whenever he shifted. Button, Midge, and Tinker had remained at the store with Della. Harlan suspected the court had rules against puppies stealing evidence from attorneys. Lena Quaid sat at the counsel table beside Daniel Holt, a volunteer legal aid attorney from Bismarck. Daniel was 58, tall and spare, with silver hair cut close at the sides and a neatly trimmed beard that sharpened an otherwise gentle face. He wore a dark navy suit that had been repaired carefully at one cuff. Years of representing farmers, widows, and disabled veterans had given him a quiet manner and a habit of speaking, as though every word had to earn its place. Across the aisle sat North Prairie's attorneys. Conrad Pell occupied the chair nearest the witness stand. His charcoal suit was as precise as ever, but the skin beneath his eyes looked gray from lost sleep. He kept his hands folded on the table. Meredith Sloan was not present. The company's attorney explained that she was attending to an internal compliance matter. No one in the room mistook that for coincidence. Judge Evelyn Hart entered shortly after 9. She was 63, with short white hair, dark brown skin, and a composed face that revealed little before she chose to speak. Small, rimless glasses rested low on her nose. She had spent more than 2 decades hearing property disputes across rural counties, and possessed the patient severity of someone who had watched polite language hide cruelty before. Everyone rose. The hearing began without ceremony. North Prairie argued first. The Morrow loan was secured by a valid lien. Payments had become inconsistent. The company had the right to pursue recovery. Errors in photographs or data could be administrative rather than intentional. The attorney then turned to Mercy General Store. The business carried unpaid supplier obligations, deferred maintenance, and unresolved estate issues. According to North Prairie, Harlan had reopened an unstable business and used community emotion to interfere with legitimate collection. Harlan felt several people behind him shift. Daniel Holt placed one hand over a page and waited. When his turn came, he did not describe North Prairie as evil. He described the evidence. The original bank reconciliation ledger showed the true Morrow balance before transfer. Payment records showed years of consistent compliance. The January inspection report used a summer photograph. 4 additional county files contained nearly identical language and repeated spelling errors. Internal emails categorized older rural homeowners by their likelihood of resisting. Marjorie Pike's signed statement described the use of public property photographs when inspections were not completed. The company measured voluntary title transfers as a performance target. Daniel did not claim all 47 cases were identical. He asked the judge to prevent further action until the records could be examined. North Prairie argues that delay causes financial harm, Daniel said. But foreclosure, forced transfer, and closure of a community business cannot be undone easily if the documents supporting them are later found unreliable. Lena handed him another exhibit. It contained Conrad's approval history. Conrad was called to the witness stand. He walked forward with controlled steps and raised his right hand. Daniel asked whether he had personally visited the Morrow property. No. Did you approve reports describing its occupancy status? I approved batches based on information supplied by the inspection and data departments. Did you know some rural inspections were completed using older photographs? Conrad's eyes moved briefly toward North Prairie's attorney. I knew replacement images were sometimes used when weather or access prevented a new photograph. Were those reports labeled as using replacement images? Not always. Did you ever see an image showing summer vegetation attached to a winter inspection? Silence followed. It lasted only a few seconds. In a courtroom, a few seconds could become a confession without words. I may have, Conrad said. Did you question it? I do not recall. Daniel placed an email on the display screen. Conrad's name appeared beneath an approval message. Proceed. Borrower has low response probability. Daniel asked, what did low response probability mean? It was an internal risk designation. Risk to whom? Conrad did not answer immediately. To the recovery timeline. Daniel looked toward the judge. Did a computer decide that elderly rural borrowers were less likely to seek legal help? North Prairie's attorney objected. Judge Hart allowed Daniel to rephrase. Lena leaned toward him and whispered something. Daniel nodded. Mr. Pell, did an automated system create the categories used to prioritize older rural homeowners, or did employees and managers choose those categories? Conrad looked down at his folded hands. Employees selected the criteria. The courtroom became completely still. Meredith was absent. The company wanted the blame placed on software, conversion errors, and disconnected departments. But software had not invented the belief that silence made a person easier to remove. A person had taught the system what to value. Judge Hart asked several questions of her own. She wanted to know why North Prairie offered voluntary transfers before completing balance reviews. She asked why Everett's account carried property preservation fees while he and Ruth continued living in the house. She asked why Mercy General Store appeared on an acquisition list before its owner had decided whether to sell. North Prairie's answers remained technically careful and morally empty. Then Judge Hart recessed. The waiting felt longer than the hearing. Everett sat with both hands around his cane. Ruth rested one palm on Sable's head. Harlan stood near the window, watching snow move across the square. He had spent much of his life expecting decisions to come as commands. Proceed. Hold. Withdraw. This decision belonged to someone else. He could not force it. For once, he did not try. When Judge Hart returned, she did not erase the Morrow debt. She did not declare every North Prairie account fraudulent. She did not award Mercy General Store damages or promise that the town would be protected forever. She issued temporary relief. North Prairie was ordered to stop further foreclosure activity against the Morrow property while the accounting was investigated. The company could not change locks, pressure the Morrows into a voluntary title transfer, or add new preservation fees without review. Mercy General Store could continue operating during the dispute. All relevant records had to be preserved. The questionable files would be referred to state investigators. Other affected homeowners could seek separate relief or apply to join future proceedings. Judge Hart looked directly at Everett and Ruth. This order does not decide where you should live, she said. It preserves your right to participate in that decision. Ruth closed her eyes. Everett's chin dropped toward his chest. Sable rose and pressed one shoulder against his knee. It was not a complete victory. It was time. Sometimes, time was the first thing powerful people tried to take from those who had less. Outside the courtroom, Conrad found Harlan near the stairwell. For once, he carried no folder. My mother lost her house when I was 26, Conrad said. Harlan studied him. She had medical debt. By the time anyone explained the process, the fees had doubled. She fought for a year and lost anyway, so you decided faster was kinder. Conrad looked through the stairwell window. I decided delay only gave people false hope, and then you built a career taking hope away before they could decide whether it was false." Conrad's jaw tightened. "I thought I was ending the pain. Something happening to your family does not make it right to keep happening to other families." Conrad did not apologize. He asked, "Do you honestly believe Everett can remain in that house forever?" "No." The answer surprised him. Harlan continued, "Needing to change does not mean you get to choose which changes belong to him." Conrad looked away. The investigation lasted months. Truth moved more slowly than winter, but it moved. North Prairie's records showed enough irregularities to widen the inquiry. Meredith Sloan became the focus of state investigators after emails linked her directly to the selection criteria and pressure targets. A North Prairie subsidiary changed its name and transferred some accounts. Conrad had been right about one thing. A system could change its name faster than a community could learn how to fight it. He cooperated partly because he understood the company would sacrifice him to protect itself. His help did not erase what he had done. Marjorie Pike faced legal threats but refused to withdraw her statement. One of the 47 families had already sold before the evidence surfaced. That home could not simply be returned by a good ruling. The victories remained imperfect. Everett and Ruth kept their house, but sold a distant strip of unused land to pay the legitimate portion of the loan and repair the heating system. They installed handrails, an emergency alarm, and a ground-floor sleeping area. Ruth agreed to take her medication properly. Everett received 2 new hearing aids and complained that they allowed him to hear far too much foolishness. Pickles was registered with an emergency pet care list. Mercy General Store survived, though Harlan had to take a modest repair loan, replace part of the roof himself, and live with fewer comforts than he had planned. He stayed beyond 90 days. He never made an announcement about it. The for-sale sign simply disappeared from the window. A new board appeared beside the register. NIBOR, check participation, was voluntary. People could list the days they normally visited, a person to call if they stopped appearing, who held an emergency key, what pet needed care during hospitalization, and whether they required fuel or medication delivery. No medical condition had to be written down. No one was required to explain why they joined. The board was not surveillance. It was a promise that absence would not be mistaken for privacy until it became tragedy. Ruth opened a small lending library near the stove. Everett taught Saturday repair lessons and frequently told Caleb Moss that he held a wrench, like he was apologizing to it. Polly restored her meal route with one new rule. When someone canceled repeatedly, she asked one more question. Wade drove people to medical appointments and never mentioned gasoline. Pickles received a padded bed beside the stove. He pretended to dislike Sable, but often slept with his tail touching her front paw. Midge was adopted by a widowed nurse named Carol Whitman, a warm-faced 62-year-old with silver blonde hair and a fenced backyard. Carol had spent years caring for others and admitted she wanted a small creature who might occasionally need nothing more complicated than her lap. Tinker went home with a young mail carrier who learned that every delivery route became longer when a shepherd puppy believed every snowbank deserved investigation. Button remained at the store. No one had confidence in the safety of their gloves, but everyone agreed the place would feel wrong without him. Sable stayed beside the register. Whenever Everett and Ruth missed their usual visit, she stood at the front door and looked toward Lantern Road. Harlan no longer called it anxiety. He called it the memory of love. One bright winter morning, an old sedan stopped outside. The driver remained inside for several minutes. He was a thin man in his late 70s, with a deeply lined face, a gray cap, and both hands gripping the steering wheel, as though leaving the vehicle required more courage than driving there. Sable walked onto the porch. She did not approach the car. She lay several yards away and waited. Eventually, the man entered the store. He placed a heating bill on the counter. "I do not need money," he said. "I only—" The sentence stopped. Harlan did not complete it for him. He poured a cup of coffee. "You do not have to say the rest today." Button ran past with a new leather glove in his mouth. The old man watched him disappear beneath the counter. Then he laughed. Outside, snow moved gently across Main Street. Sable returned to the rug and lowered her head onto her paws. Harlan looked around the room at people who had once believed their troubles belonged only to them. He had once believed destiny arrived in gunfire, helicopters, and decisions made in seconds. Sometimes it was only a mother dog standing beside an old delivery cart in the cold. Sable had not led him to a battle. She had led him back to a small store where the most important thing was not how much merchandise passed over the counter. It was whether someone noticed when a familiar face stopped coming through the door. Sometimes, the miracles God sends into our lives do not arrive with thunder, bright lights, or answers we immediately understand. Sometimes, a miracle stands in the middle of a frozen road, covered in snow, refusing to leave until someone finally stops and pays attention. Sable could not read a bill, understand a foreclosure notice, or explain why Everett and Ruth had disappeared from their usual routine. But she remembered their scent. She remembered their kindness. She remembered the road leading home, and perhaps that was the quiet miracle God placed before Harlan. The dog did not lead him toward another battle. She led him back to the people he had spent years avoiding, to the memories he had tried to bury, and to a small store where he finally learned that needing help is not the same as being weak. Many of us are like Everett and Ruth. We hide our fear because we do not want to become a burden. We say we are fine because we are afraid that once people see our struggle, they will begin making decisions for us. We carry unpaid bills, grief, illness, loneliness, and regret behind closed doors. Believing dignity means suffering without being seen. But God did not create us to walk through every storm alone. Sometimes He answers a prayer through a neighbor who notices an empty chair. Sometimes through a friend who asks one more question. Sometimes through a stranger who brings food, repairs a heater, offers a ride, or simply sits beside us without demanding an explanation. And sometimes He sends an animal whose faithful heart notices what busy people have forgotten. The greatest lesson from Harlan, Sable, Everett, and Ruth is not that every problem can be solved with money or courage. It is that healing begins when someone is willing to notice, and when another person is brave enough to say, "I need help." In our daily lives, there may be someone whose absence has become easy to overlook. An elderly neighbor who has not opened the curtains. A friend who stopped calling. A family member who keeps saying everything is fine. A person at church, at work, or down the street who may be waiting for someone to remember their name. Do not wait for a perfect reason to reach out. Make the call. Knock on the door. Bring the coffee. Ask one more time. Your kindness may feel small to you, but in God's hands, it may become the miracle that keeps someone from disappearing in silence. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who still believes that compassion can change a life. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and whether an animal has ever helped you through a difficult season. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories about loyalty, second chances, faith, and the quiet ways God brings people back to one another. May God bless you, protect your family, strengthen you through every hidden struggle, and place faithful hearts beside you whenever the road becomes cold and lonely. And may you never forget that asking for help is not the end of your strength. Sometimes it is the moment God begins to show you that you were never alone.